thanks a lot for being here tonight. It's a great pleasure for us at yex to host a great speaker, consultant, and writer, Gib Bulloch. Gib, as I was saying, is a really insightful person because he always gives a different perspective, I would say, for the relationship between the man as an employee, but as a human being, and his role in the society. He has given lectures to top universities like Harvard, the London Business School, and he collaborates with the Huffington Post, with many journals, so it's really an honor for us to have him tonight. And it's a pleasure for us also to introduce him to his book, The Intrapreneur Confession of a Corporate Insurgent, because we will hear about the revolution that happened in his life, in his professional life, personal life, that he will share with us to give, again, a new perspective, new ideas to all of us, that I'm sure as a young executive at a certain point we ask ourselves, what should I do in my life, in my career, how can I contribute to the society, and how much can I gain, how much can I lose from this decision. And it's, I think, something that happened to him, and it's really, it will be really helpful for us to hear from him tonight. So again, thanks for everyone, and thanks Gib for accepting our invitation.
Delighted to, thank you. Good evening, everyone. I can go home now, that's great, round of applause. Thanks very much indeed for coming out. It seems a heavily Italian, who's not Italian here actually? Oh, I'm wrong. So I'm going to, I won't be speaking in Italian tonight. My partner is Italian, and she's just taught me the bad words in Italian, so I'm going to have to speak English, but with a Scottish accent. So I guess I will speak slowly. There's no subtitles. In fact, I won't even be using slides tonight. You've had enough PowerPoint, okay? These big PowerPoint decks. You'll be glad to know that I won't be using PowerPoint tonight. And at some point, we can take this thing off the screen if you want, because it's quite alarming to see your head 2 meters high and your chin is over there or something like that. It's very strange, but no, it's just going to be a little bit of talking. And I do want to make it interactive because we can see where this goes. My sense is that I'm happy to, I mean, I don't know, it's a bit like a menu, if you will. You have the PowerPoint thing is the menu fixe, and I'd rather do something more a la carte. Okay, so we'll go a little bit a la carte. I'll give you the appetizer, which is just a bit of background on myself, and the story, a bit of a summary, and then we go into the a la carte. You can choose where we want to go deeper, so that we can co-create this presentation. So if it's rubbish, it's as much your fault as it is my fault, because you haven't come up with the nice ideas. But we'll co-create it, and we can go deeper on certain themes. You can choose which plates. Like any good restaurant, you can actually throw in ideas that are maybe not on the menu. I'll give you a few options. Do you want to go into this area or that area? But you can choose your own areas, and then we'll decide what we do together for dessert, or we just go straight to the wine if you want. That's another possibility as well. Marina mentioned the book, and I've got them down the front here. I didn't write this book because I wanted to be an author. It's a book that I'm using to tell a story and to allow me to come and speak to people like you. The trouble with the book is, it's a bit like telling a joke, right? When someone tells the punchline of your joke before you get there, when everybody knows the punchline of a joke, and basically the punchline of my joke is in the back page. So if you read anything about before you came here, then you kind of know the punchline, but summary: worked in business, tried to set up a non-profit in business, went a bit nuts, ended up in hospital, and now I'm here. That's the sort of summary presentation, so we can stop there if you want. Or, like in all good sort of, I'm sure it's the same in Italian as it is in Scottish, it's the way you tell the joke. It's the way you tell the story. I used to remember listening to my father and some of his friends in the pubs on this island in Scotland where I grew up. And we all knew what the punchline was going to be when, with this joke.
And it would take 10 or 15 minutes of telling a story before you got to the punchline that you already knew. But the story would always come out slightly different. Some things would be dropped, some new things would come in, and it was all in the way of telling. So I'm hoping I'm going to tell that story in a little bit more detail. We'll see what emerges. And then we can start asking questions. So yes, Confessions of a Corporate Surgeon. And the message in the back, or the question on the back that I sort of pose to you and pose to the reader is, can you find your purpose without losing your mind? I didn't do very well at that, but who knows what's crazy and what's normal. Who's in business here, by the way, versus other organizations? Hands up if you're in business, just to... probably big, yeah, from the background of big business. And other people, international organizations? Nobody? Nobody? NGOs, non-profit? Government? Unemployed? Student? Who's not in any of these categories? Shout out what you do. Yes, sir.
I founded my own company, so it's a small one.
Oh, okay. But you're in a startup business then, maybe. Okay, you're in business. Okay, fair enough. But not a big multinational. Okay, fair enough. Great. So I'll speak and say, and give you the appetizer. I'm also going to, I came in overnight. This is why my eyes are very red. I came in overnight from Singapore, having been in Bali last week. So I've got some Balinese chocolates here. I think I might give them out individually to reward participation or particularly good questions, or maybe even particularly good answers. So that's the incentive up there. Incentive there. I also have a star prize as well for the best answer to a question, which is a bottle of whiskey. Bottle of single malt whiskey. Scottish people are renowned for their generosity, not lying to... Hey, come on. No, we're not renowned for our generosity, but I have bought a bottle of whiskey for a prize to a question that will be coming up. So stay tuned. The clues are going to be going on throughout the presentation as to that. So, my background, I guess I mentioned to you, I grew up in this Scottish, little Scottish island. And like most of my peers, I escaped to follow the bright lights. I went firstly to Glasgow. Who's been in Scotland here? MDB? Yeah, okay, well done, great. I'm not going to, I would give away all my chocolates if I gave to that. No prizes for being in Scotland, but you all must go to Scotland sometime. Glasgow, I was studying, I went into engineering, I wasn't a very good engineer. And then I found my way down to London, to the sort of the bright lights of London, because I was told that that was what you would do if you were successful. I was drawn by this lure, these KPIs, success indicators of you know, what would make you rich and happy and contented. It was going to be a fast car, not a Ferrari, but you know, something like a Porsche, you know, a good job, a jet set lifestyle, one of these little gold cards for the luggage, business class travel. I got all of that. And on the paper, by the time I got to my late 20s, you would say I was doing fairly well, even early 30s. Okay, had enough money, nice restaurants. But there was something kind of missing. You know, I was living this dream of what would make you successful, but it wasn't really my dream. There was something missing that I couldn't quite put my finger on. And I now know what it is. But I didn't know till it jumped out of a newspaper at me. There was an article written by a politician, quite a well-known politician in the UK, who became the EU trade minister, a guy called Peter Mandelson. 1999, March, he penned this article in the Financial Times about a charity called Volunteers Services Overseas, who normally send teachers and doctors and nurses and volunteers to different countries, but they were looking for business people. They didn't have enough business people to meet the demands in developing countries. So this was this article saying how, you know, you could volunteer from your company. The company would keep your job open, so it was just a sort of secondment. You'd go and do some work using your skills. You weren't going to dig a well or, you know, paint the school and feel good. You were actually going to use your business skills in a different context for a different kind of impact. And this just jumped out the page at me. And you know, it was unbelievable. There I was, you know, I'd found the Holy Grail, if you will. And within a year, I was Accenture. I was working for Accenture at the time. It was called Anderson Consulting then, but that's probably, you're not old enough to remember that name change. And I got sent to the Balkans. I just said, send me wherever you want, wherever my skills can be best used. So I went to the Balkans. And I was on a salary reduction of maybe something like 95%. And I was never more motivated in my life. You know, forget all the fast restaurants and all that lifestyle. 95% reduction. I'm jumping out of bed in the morning. I'd found this drug called purpose. Okay, I was an addict. If purpose is a drug, I was hooked. This was great. You know, I was helping small businesses get access to credit, or women entrepreneurs, training them in e-business and things like that, or supporting this local office. So I just had a great time there for a year. And I'd intended to sort of go away and do this thing to make myself feel better about my job and the money I was earning, to give myself a little pat on the shoulder and say, well done, you've done a good job, now go back and make partner, get the next promotion, go up the ladder, keep going up. But the drug was too deep in the veins. So I went from being a sort of drug addict to being a drug dealer. And by that I mean, and this is getting filmed, so I need to be a bit careful about what I say here, especially in Switzerland, right? But what I mean by that is, in the long winter evenings in Macedonia, I've been thinking, well, you know, it's fine that I'm here as an individual, but I'm probably learning and getting more out of this experience than I'm able to do and have an impact. And why is it that, you know, consultancies like McKinsey and Accenture and PwC, they are nowhere to be seen in these countries. They're too damn expensive, right? You're by this much. And it's the same in Africa, it's the same in other developing countries. What if there was a business model? What if there was an innovation that would allow us to industrialize what we're doing? If I was working on half my salary, if I was working on a 95% salary reduction, maybe people would work on half their salary. That was my idea, you know, just sitting in these long, cold winter evenings. And maybe Accenture would not have to make profit on work that was in the development sector with NGOs. It could probably say, okay, we make our profit and lots of profit over here. We don't have to make profit from UNICEF or the Red Cross or these other organizations that are all scattered around Geneva. And maybe we could get these organizations to actually buy services. Traditionally in big consulting, anybody come from a big consultancy or professional services company here? No? No one's in from these evil empires? No? No, yeah, you are.
Well,
which one?
7 years and a half. It's called Simon Cooker and Partners.
It's a consultancy.
Yes.
Does it do any pro bono work? Free of charge? No?
No.
Oh my God, that's quite tight. Okay, most big consultancies give away pro bono. You know, they say, okay, when we've got some people who aren't too busy, we can give them away for 2 weeks or a day or maybe a month if you're lucky. But it doesn't really add up to a whole lot. It's not a sustainable or scalable business model. So I had these ideas and came up with this notion that now has become Accenture Development Partnerships. And I came and pitched the idea in the form of a fake press article. I wrote, on the way home, I wrote this kind of article. Rather than coming in with a big spreadsheet and a financial model and 50 pages of PowerPoint, 2 pages. How would it look if our chairman was launching a non-profit arm in Davos 2 years in the future? Complete lies, but it was just a vision. It was just an idea. It was just a dream. And luckily, he kind of bought into the dream, quite liked it. He said to me subsequently, this is years later, he said, you know, this really caught my attention. Normally, I've got all these people coming to me asking to raise their salary or a promotion or an extra bonus. Here was somebody coming asking to half their salary with a lot of other people. So he said, you got my attention with that. And we had a breakfast, and then it went from one thing to the next. And we did a feasibility study. Feasibility study became a pilot. A pilot launched. And against the odds, despite people saying, you know, you're crazy, it will never work. People will never work on half their salary. NGOs will never pay money to Accenture. Against the odds, we got going. 3 of us. And it became 10 of us. It became 50 of us. It became several hundred of us working in what I call now really a social enterprise within. You've all heard of social enterprises, right? Social enterprises they're not charities, they're more like small businesses that have a social purpose as well as to make money, or not make money, or not make a loss. So social enterprise, social entrepreneurs. I was working as a social entrepreneur. I didn't know the term intrapreneur until about 5-6 years later, when somebody called Maggie Dupre, who my friend in the audience there, John, knows well, she came along and said, hey, I'm doing this study for the Skull Foundation on social entrepreneurs inside big companies. And we call them intrapreneurs. I said, are you sure? Is that a real word? No, she said, we call them intrapreneurs, social entrepreneurs. We think you're one of these people. And I'd want to interview you. And she did, and she interviewed other people in other organizations. And really that's where I learned about this notion that there are people, if you want to make a difference, some people leave and they go and join a charity, some people leave and they become a social entrepreneur. But the idea that rather than leaving your company, you can stay in your company and try and change the company from within. Try and get that sort of huge supertanker moving in a different direction. And you only need to move a supertanker a little bit, one way or the other. You know, first question for a chocolate, just to get you guys and girls speaking. Supertanker, Nestle, down the lake. How many customers does Nestle have in a day? There you go. Closest answer gets it. Shout out. Couple of what? A couple of billion. Okay. Not bad. Any other guesses? A couple of billion in a day. P&G had 1 billion. An educated guess. Anybody want to challenge that number? Oh, these look quite good actually. These are from Bali. Look at all the different beaches of Bali. That's quite nice. Any other guesses for a chocolate?
200 million.
I think, I mean, it might be 2 billion now. The last time I heard it was 1.5 billion. I asked this question once to some students and somebody shouted out 15 billion or something. I said, there's only 7 point. Everyone on the planet buys 2 Nestle products every day, so educated guess. It's incredible. It's absolutely, okay, I'll do another one. Also topical, WWF, you know them? They're down in Glon, the panda bears and nature. The CEO was a client of mine when I was in ADP. He told me a statistic that I will never forget. How many liters of water does it take to make 1 liter of Coca-Cola? Another chocolate is on the go. Is it good, by the way, the chocolate? Oh, you haven't eaten yet? Okay, fair enough. Yeah, it's too nice. It's too nice a picture. Take it home to your wife or girlfriends. They'll be very happy. How many liters? 1 liter of Coke. How many liters of water? 40 liters. Good guess. Anybody want to go above or below that? Sorry? 80? John's going for 100. Any other?
A low ball, 6.
Low ball. John? But you're wrong. If you doubled it and halved it again, 253 was the answer a few years ago. 253 litres. Why is worth another chocolate? Why 253 litres? Why so big? Machines, yeah. The machines in the process accounts for 3 litres. So there's another 250. Why do you like drinking Coke? Also? Sugar. How do you get sugar? Sugar cane. Very, very thirsty. Very, very thirsty. I think it's I'm not going to try throwing it. Somebody else might grab it while it goes by, so I'm going to come up and make sure. Yeah, the sugar cane is, there you go, congratulations. It's 250 litres. Now, if you're growing your sugar cane in Scotland, I don't think it grows there, but there's a lot of water, so it's not a problem. In India, as Coca-Cola found, it's a big problem if you're trying to make Coke and there's a village downstream. You know, they had to shut factories as a result of that, and it's a huge issue. My point being, organizations, big companies have got so big. We've got $2 trillion companies in the last few months alone. So if you want to get to scale, if you want to get to social impact, if you care about reducing water, fresh water. You know, start talking to Coca-Cola. If you care about plastic in the ocean, I would be trying to get to these 1.5 billion customers, Nestle. So you get the idea. And that's why entrepreneurship is for me, is interesting. So we carried on in this guerrilla movement, as I describe us. We were doing things like, you know, people say, well, what do business people know about the charity sector? Not very much is the answer. But, you know, most of the big charities, they still need to have good IT systems and processes. They still need to have logistics and supply chain to get, you know, it might, you know, normally Accenture would help a supermarket or a food company like P&G, you know, get its products A to B more efficiently, more cheaply. That's the same for UNICEF when it comes to vaccines or medicines. Technology, the use of the mobile phone, e-learning to train nurses. We did a big e-learning project in Kenya. Kenya had wanted to train 25,000 nurses, and it had 200 places a year in the nurses training schools. So, you know, it was going to take them 100 years to train the number of nurses they needed. We came along, e-learning platform, worked with an NGO, and you would do the same project the same training in about 5 years. And what's more, you would have a better outcome in terms of the results. And the nurses wouldn't have to go away for 2 years away from their families. They could work and train on the job. So we were doing great stuff. The first few years, we'd work with non-profits, selling our services at 20% of the normal rates. Accenture would work with the bigger businesses, make its money. It was all fine. And then it got more exciting. We'd start to collaborate with big companies. We'd start to bring, you know, I don't think it was P&G, but we worked with Unilever and Oxfam. I don't know whether folks know of Oxfam, bringing smallholder farmers, women farmers in Tanzania into the supply chain of Unilever's vegetable soup, for example. Coca-Cola and their supply chain expertise, working with the Global Fund, the Gates Foundation. We'd start to become the sort of convener of really interesting coalitions. Barclays wanting to get microfinance to the villages in Africa. They didn't have any presence, no banks in the villages in Africa, so they partnered with NGOs. So we'd be the glue in some of these things. So I was happy, everything was going great. I got promoted. The less I'd been worried about money, the money came for itself. I got promoted, I got money, and then the share ups was going great. Awards. And then in 2014, you know, there's always a but in the story, you know, so the story was going really well, and this is when I get to this sort of, the punchline, I suppose, and then I'll sort of summarize and we'll open up to the a la carte section. Yeah, 2014, I moved to Geneva 2010 or 11. I live like 200 meters down the road in Plainpalais across the diamond from here. But I'd gone to India. A bit frustrated, things had got tough. In 10 years, we'd really had some successes. We'd provided from a standing start about $250 million worth of services in 80 countries around the world. We worked with all the biggest NGOs that all the household name NGOs, thousands of Accenture staff, working on half salary, contributing millions of their own money. The numbers looked really, really good on paper, but I still wasn't content. There was more we needed to do. And the more I saw the potential for what we could do, the more I was struggling because I couldn't get the leadership to buy into what I saw. I saw this big potential to really move the needle on these development issues. And there was a change of boss, all sorts of stuff. We can go into that in the a la carte. But anyway, it got tough. I was in India for a leadership training program, a kind of retreat. And I was out my comfort zone. We were doing meditation and things like that. I'd never done that. Yoga, never done that. Sufi spinning workshops. And so I was completely out my comfort zone. And something happened, I don't know, but I picked up a fever, came back here, sitting in my apartment, just about, you know, McDonald's and Starbucks and across the road. My apartment's at the top there. If we all want to go back for a drink, it's absolutely fine. I've got some whiskey and some beers. And I was having a fever. And it was like 40 plus and shaking. And then when the fever went down and the emergency doctor, you know, they can call the emergency doctor, they came round. It was like, oh my God, you're so hot, it's unbelievable. Kept me in bed for a few days. The fever went down, then I had a manic episode. At the time, it felt amazing. I mean, really like a has anybody heard of that ayahuasca kind of, where people go away on these, and, I was like on natural ayahuasca or LSD. I wasn't, but it was like a natural thing. And I just wasn't sleeping. I was having ideas. I started writing my resignation letter just to have ready to prove to myself I could leave. I wrote a letter to the CEO. I dictate it 4 a.m, and that little iPhone app where you give your recorder. So I'd sort of, "Dear Pierre," the guy's name's Pierre, "I am very frustrated. Our baby is dying. Please help." And I get up in the morning, write it up, and send it off to him. So I was going a bit nuts. And then I was back in Scotland for a friend's dad's funeral as it happened, and my friend said, "Hey, you're not behaving, you're not your normal self." They know I'm always quite excited, I'll talk a lot, but I was talking twice as fast as even I'm talking now. And they took me into hospital, and I stayed in hospital 5 days, 5 nights. And for somebody who has always considered himself very content, very happy, I had enough money, I didn't have too many worries, okay, the job was a bit tough, but this mental health stuff, it was for somebody else. This was somebody else that had these problems. It never was going to happen to me. I thought I was bulletproof, and I wasn't. And statistically, 1 in 4 of the people in this room, so that's a decent handful of people, will have had some experience, and I think the numbers are actually more than that. The number of people that have come to me after reading this book and saying, "Thanks for speaking up. It's funny what happened to you. I haven't told anybody about this, but I've had a similar experience." So let me just come to the summary of why I'm writing the book, and one of it is to do with mental health. There's 3 main reasons. As I say, it's not to make money. If you want to make money, don't write a book. You'll make no money out of writing a book. It takes you several years, and then you get no money back because people don't make money from books. But the first reason is really just I hold a mirror up to the system in the book. I'm asking, and I've been trying to ask myself over the last few years while writing, was it me that went a bit crazy, or was it the system that I was trying to change? Is it really so incredibly crazy to suggest that business has a role in the world beyond just making profit in the short term for shareholders or high-frequency traders, or any traders here? No. Good, I'm not a fan of traders, but anyway, there you go. Business can and should have a role in doing more. When it comes to the Sustainable Development Goals, the 17 of these Sustainable Development Goals that Italy and the UK and the US, all countries around the world have signed up to, how we feed and nourish the next billion on the planet and provide them with access to healthcare and water and sanitation and nutrition and clean energy. These goals, they're like a perfect business plan for business. If businesses think in the long term and create the new business models to serve these kind of social needs, there's a lot of money to be made. There's a report saying that actually it's about 12 or 13 trillion dollars by 2030 is on the table for business to engage in these goals. And traditionally we've always said, that's all, business makes its money over here, it does oil or it makes food, and these are that's the territory of the UN, that's the territory of the non-profit sector. But I'm saying no, these things are converging. It's not a corporate social responsibility issue. It's not for a foundation, it's not philanthropic. This is core business. And technology is enabling these things to be done differently. So business has to change. But my second point in the book is, I do not see it coming top down. I do not see an army of CEOs saying, driving this. Because frankly, what I'm talking to you about now and what the millennials, which might be many of you in here, are thinking about, it wasn't taught in business schools when these CEOs were doing their MBAs 25 or 30 years ago. It wasn't. And so I think they're ill-equipped to do it. And also I don't think they've got the incentives. If you've got to the top from a system that's not working and you're doing quite well and you're the chief exec, why do you want to rock the boat? You're captain of the ship. Captains of the ship don't rock the boat. So I think it's going to have to come from us. Okay, I say us. I'm not a millennial age-wise, but I think millennial is a kind of, it's more a mindset, okay? I don't think it's an age. I feel a millennial. I'm a millennial trapped in a Gen X body or something. And I think it's, you know, there's some really interesting stuff happening at the moment in terms of employee activism and engagement. And I think there's more of that we can look to if you want to. So we need an insurgency. We need intrapreneurs. We need entrepreneurs to drive the innovation inside their businesses. And then the third area is back to this area of mental health. A main reason for writing the book was to stand up and be counted, because there's not enough people, particularly at more senior levels of business, who are prepared to say, yeah, this happened to me, so we break the taboo. It's seen as a sign of weakness or something. Personally, I must admit, standing in front of a group of strangers and opening up about this thing, I actually feel vulnerable, but actually more strong and more powerful than I did when I thought I was, you know, a bulletproof person that this didn't affect. So I'm doing that, but I also think we cannot address that issue, that very important issue of the individual mental health, without looking at the mental health of the organizations in the system. Because that's, for me, is what is crazy. The system and this short-term, singular focus on profit is, I think, fairly crazy. So we need to somehow change that and move on beyond that. And that's where it links in, I think, to the first theme, the purpose of business, going beyond just profit. If we had businesses that were doing a bit more good in the world, if we had businesses that people could say aligned to their values and engaged people in different ways, maybe we might have happier, less burnt out, more engaged people. At the moment, businesses' response to mental health is, you know, yoga rooms and sushi at the desk and massages and all this stuff. That's missing the point. For me, they have to take a long, hard look at themselves and say, what is business about? Who is it serving? What's it doing? What's your purpose? If you don't have a purpose, what are you in business for? So for me, we miss the point. So these are the, that's the sort of overview, if you will. The book, if you don't like business books, and I don't really like business books, this is the business book for you, because it's not really a business book, it's a story. And there's good guys and bad guys, and there's successes and failures, and maybe some wee funny stories in there as well. Sorry, wee is a Scottish word, I'm getting into Scottish there. But it's a story that talks about that in more detail. But why don't I open up now to you know, I'll offer you a few dishes on the menu then, in terms of if you wanted to go deeper. I think one of the, you know, one could be some of these little funny stories, because my career, I find business, you know, and I've been lucky enough to have some funny things happen, and I share some of these anecdotes. So that's one option, is some of the funny stories in business. There's another one around the role of leadership in all of this. I've touched on this, but there's more we can talk about in terms of what can leaders do to encourage more intrapreneurs. Is it a good thing for business to have intrapreneurs, or a bad thing? There's one chapter in the book called The Corporate Immune System. I think corporations, like bodies, have an immune system, that they have antibodies, that when you're trying to do something different, when you're trying to do something that's not about maximizing shareholder value tomorrow, then the antibodies start coming out. So we could talk about the corporate immune system in more detail. We can talk about employee activism and things. That's very interesting and topical at the moment when you see what's going on in Google and Microsoft. So we can go in any of these areas, or we can go to something that you want to talk about. And I'll come back to questions. If there are questions, I can do questions as well, but these were the themes. Yes, please. A question, please.
I have my own business as well.
Yes.
And I work with the private sector and the non-profit sector.
Yes.
I have been working with some organizations in the non-profit sector that are absolutely amazing, changing the world. Their people are full of purpose and passion.
Yep.
And what I have seen sometimes in this environment
Yes.
is what seems to be purpose burnout.
Yes, that's interesting. That's another theme of the whole mental health thing, purpose burnout. So burnout from pursuing.
Yes, and I think
Yeah.
that, you know, they are a startup.
Yeah.
And we have grown a lot in the last 5 years.
You deserve a chocolate for that. They're a startup. They've grown a lot in the last 5 years.
And
Yeah.
you see, they grew without the proper systems to
Yes.
prevent
Yeah.
that kind of burnout. So what are your thoughts on how to help this people?
I think you raise a really, really interesting question, and I'm not sure I've got all the answers in this. I think you just identified a problem, particularly in the non-profit sector, and I know it's been identified in the social entrepreneurship section, and it will be coming into, case in point, the intrapreneurship section. Because if you're doing a job in Migros, I guess, right? You finish at 5 or 6 o'clock. In Geneva, it's much earlier than everywhere else, right? But you finish, you go away from your job, and you go home, and you switch on the television, or you go and play sport, and you can relax. And you go in the next day, you're in your job, and then you can leave. If you're trying to provide, keep kids alive in Africa through providing medicines, or if you're trying to look at education or other areas, the job is never going to be done. And I certainly found myself, it's 24/7. You're in the shower in the morning, you're thinking about this thing. You're on a Saturday night in the restaurant, you're thinking about this stuff. It never really goes. And so there is a very high incidence. And I do know in the social entrepreneurship area, there has been an initiative called the Wellbeing Initiative that for the last 3 years has been taking social entrepreneurs. They saw there was huge burnout in that area, and they've been trying to find ways, and the details I'm not too clear on, but find ways of making sure that they're aware of this and that people can look after themselves. Because it's a bit like they say in these aircraft, you please fix your own oxygen mask before you help other people. If you want to be a social entrepreneur or intrapreneur and drive change, you're not much good to anybody if this happens to you. And I'm maybe the case in point. So it's an important issue you raise, and thank you for raising it. Any other of the ideas that I was sharing with you want to hear more about, or questions? Yeah.
Maybe,
Do you want to just say your name as well, maybe the organisation you're from and your name while we... Sorry, I'll ask, what was your name and
Fabiana.
from which organisation?
My organization is called Leading Life.
Lead in Life, fantastic, thank you. And?
Nizar in automotive.
Automotive.
A comment and a question.
Yeah.
So with a step back, after writing the book and the years of experience, is there some optimism behind this, or some disillusionment in the system that basically we need to wait for like a big bang revolution?
I'll put that. What does anybody else think in terms of that question? Optimistic or pessimistic? I'm glass. For me, that glass is half full. That's my natural demeanour. It's probably actually more empty than full, but for me it is, and I'll tell you why. Yes. The question is there grounds for optimism, I think, for business to do this? Is that right? Are there signs that this is...
If with your experience and everything you've seen,
Yeah.
and also after having written the book, you found some optimism and solutions to the issues you've raised, or basically there's something fundamentally flawed in the system, in capitalism, whereas it doesn't suffice for these small little actions here and there, and it's a big revolution.
I think I'll be interested to get. I'll give you a quick answer on that, and then I'm going to sort of also maybe point to John. So I'll tell John to, because you can get his thoughts prepared, because John and I are both visiting fellows at a university in the UK called Cranfield, and John's doing a PhD on entrepreneurship, and maybe John, you might want to share a couple of the better examples that you know of where this is going on. But I am particularly, I think it's particularly interesting what we're seeing taking place in terms of employee activism just now. Did you ever see this Google walkouts and things where Google employees? I mean, they're not unionized labor. They're These are well-paid people in great organizations with careers, and they decided to walk out. If you didn't see it, it was over the fact that Google had allowed some of its very, very senior people to walk out with a big payoff, quietly and with dignity, having been accused or found guilty of sexual harassment. Okay, so the employees walked out. So the employee power is quite amazing. In Microsoft, it was around the Mexican immigrants, and software engineers said, we do not want to work with clients who are separating kids from their parents. So I think employees are only now starting to find that they have agency, individually as intrapreneurs, collectively as a force. Accenture has now about 450 or 60,000 employees all around the world, and 375% of them are millennial. And it's clear that they want something different. So I think we're starting to find that if these employees find their voice through social media and other things and say, actually, we want a little bit less of this and a little bit more of that. Should we work with, I posed this question, I was in Australia last week before Singapore doing a presentation at Deloitte's. And I stood up and to this, there was probably about, I don't know, 80 odd people in the room. I said, okay, how do we maybe democratize large organizations? If Deloitte's was a democracy, would you, in this room, would you decide that you wanted to work with tobacco companies or not work with tobacco companies, for example? And I won't tell you what they said, and we had a show of hands and things, but I think very, very soon we'll start to see that influence starting to take place. So that gives me grounds for optimism. But John, you give, do you have any other things you want to add in terms of good ideas?
I've been trying to process it. And so during the course of my work, my research, I talked to about 15 major multinationals about social entrepreneurship. And first of all, I'd come away with a very pessimistic view of social entrepreneurship and how successful it is. There's lots of failures along the path of being a social entrepreneur. People come up with ideas, they either fail with the corporate immune system, or the idea fails, or they get burnt out from a purpose point of view, or just a personal point of view. That's the pessimistic view of it. However, what I do see though is more and more attempts at social entrepreneurship happening, especially in large corporations.
Yeah.
Microsoft is a good example of this constant social entrepreneurship and also use of social viewpoint as well. Working out how circles are perceived, for example, to help save the environment, help get less political problems, and open up the world to a wider internet coverage. So there's this whole series of attempts and failures, and some of them are making it through. I think to just leverage on Gib's comments as well, you see more and more activities in large companies as well. They want to be sticky, to millennials especially. The millennials like to work at companies where there is some purpose in their job. But most people like to actually get paid as well for working. But there's this retention element to having a job with purpose as well. So it's
Completely.
actually generates some shared value in the business. Like the employees get to do something with purpose, the business gets to do something good at the same time as retaining employees as well. So I think there is a slow turn, but it's not a fast turn here. So it's limited optimism.
You used to work in Amazon, John, in the US. I mean, was there much entrepreneurship going in there? I mean, Amazon touches everybody's life, whether you've got a shareholder or whatever. We're all impacted.
There's an interesting problem in social entrepreneurship, and I'll just mention it, is some companies don't like to be visibly socially entrepreneurial. And the reason for that is it often opens them up to criticism on other things they haven't done. And actually some of my research subject companies are like that. Amazon does a pile of stuff. One of the more visible things is Amazon Smile, where when you order something on Amazon, you can automatically donate to a non-profit of your choice. A portion of the profit automatically goes there all the time. And it's just for someone to go out and do that. So there's many little activities like that as social entrepreneurial activities which are supported and encouraged, but they're not actually touted as a major thing with the company. They don't have a press show around that. And there's other companies I talk to who want to do work in Syria, for example, and help people in Syria, which they do quietly because they don't want to get into a political debate about whether they should have a presence in Syria helping people or not. And so there is this big challenge with big organizations about social entrepreneurial activity exists, it might not be visible to the outside world as well.
Yeah. No, thanks for that, John. Actually, that probably deserves a... Oh, that wasn't a very good throw. That's a chocolate for you.
So someone has
And probably...
welcome to it as well, so I already have one. So
Oh, you had one? Yeah. I'll give it to... If you give it to the guy who asked the question, then thanks. Any other themes that you want to go into in any a little bit more detail? We've probably got about 10 minutes left before you get your wine and drinks. I'm expecting fine Italian wine from the Italian Chamber of Commerce. Yes?
I'd like to comment on John.
Oh, yes, sorry.
Alex, I used to work in startups, then in business, and then
Yeah.
I started a business on my own.
Yeah.
So it's a very interesting point that you made, that the companies don't want to be visibly doing social entrepreneurship because they might be criticized they don't do enough.
Yeah.
So the question right now is, what is enough in the eyes of society? I mean, if you're, so there's no such thing as great, it's just white or black. I mean, you're just a bad guy who doesn't do anything at all. Oh, you're a bad guy who's trying to do something good, but yeah, you're not even close to the good guys.
Yeah.
So doesn't that discourage?
It's a risk that it does discourage. Yeah, there's not this license to operate. Yeah, like a company
Because
don't get a license.
if you have a huge company, you can't just make a 180-degree shift and go, all right, from today on we're social. No, people remember stuff.
But it doesn't have to be from, today on we're social. It doesn't always have to be a massive shift. But I'm very interested in a group not far from here, and I've been working with them a little bit in Mondelez. Mondelez is the chocolate, Milka and Toblerone and these kind of things. There's a group in there, basically Mondelez have realized that their product line is probably, as it stands, sitting on the wrong side of history when it comes to diabetes and all the sugar and obesity and all these things. So there's an entrepreneur in there who's come from the non-profit sector into the private sector, which is another interesting notion for entrepreneurs, and is creating a new business. It was mentioned in Forbes about 2 weeks ago. You can look it up. It's a new business unit that's trying to outcompete. It's a challenger business that's trying to outcompete the traditional stacks with healthier, better ones. So, it doesn't have to be stop making all that stuff and, oh my God, we've got no business. It's kind of, these things can kind of happen, and Danone is doing some similar things. So, and you don't need, again, give me 1% of that Nestle 1.5 billion or whatever, 1% of Accenture in a different direction. It could be worth 1,000 startups or social enterprises or NGOs. But sorry, you were waiting to ask a question, I think, as well.
Stuart Rankin. So
I'll give you a...
I'm working at Coty Inc., so beauty industry.
Coty, yeah.
And my question is something I've been thinking as well.
To be an entrepreneur maybe in Coty, no?
I tried before, actually.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, and I was wondering how much do you think, or did you think, is this a structural issue? Because you mentioned before, it has to be not just top-down but bottom-up. This is partly, say, collectively part of their education, maybe part of culture.
Yeah.
But when I mean structural, I mean, as soon as you go and have an IPO, you are bound to this 90-day thinking.
The quarter-by-quarter reporting.
Yeah. So if anything is outside and not contributing to that end goal, I can see why it's so difficult for them to do anything.
I'd say a couple of points, and then John, do chime in, given that's a big thing of your PhD. I'm trying to make the point that this isn't about, we do our business here and then we do our good over there. I do believe that these social challenges, environmental challenges, are actually massive opportunities for business to do this. So it's not about, let's forget about the shareholders and serve society. This is about, hey, there's some trapped value here. There is, you probably have, maybe in Coty, I'm sure in every company, dormant 25-year-old Elon Musks who are in there frustrated, they want to change the world, and they've either left or they've burnt out or they've not been empowered. And And I really like Novartis' chief exec, new chief exec, who's 41 or 42. That makes me feel really old and a failure. But this new Novartis CEO from India is saying he wants to unboss the company. He wants to sort of, push power down and democratize in some way, or push power down the organization and let the innovation bubble up. Because I think that's where the ideas and the appetite for this is down the organization. There's a sort of temperature inversion. So the best thing I think leaders can do is empower their employees who really get it, and it will bubble up. I was in Singapore on Monday in Standard Chartered, meeting a guy I know that works there. He was a very senior person. And he just said, I changed my mind. I was getting groomed for the top. He's just gone off and set up a venture unit, SC Ventures. It's all fintech and things. And he said the employees are just loving, they're getting the chance to be CEO of a startup and create these ventures. He's creating an army of intrapreneurs. And this, between the last time I saw him and this time, you wouldn't recognize the guy. He's senior and really, and he's got the CEO is empowering them. So that's another grounds for optimism as well. There's lots of stuff happening, I think. I don't know, do you want to add anything to that, John?
That's almost a perfect explanation. I just reiterate the shared value that if you're doing good for the company's mission.
Yeah.
And I recently got a wake-up call on this. I was in a conference and someone was presenting about agency, so people doing something different from a company and how bad that was for a company. So it's completely opposite entrepreneurship. But so that's one of the reasons why the really successful innovations tend to be ones which add some value to the company's core mission. So it might add additional profit, but it might also add license to operate in different markets or encourage different markets to be able to. So very much like Gib was saying, like the people who can come up with ideas and run with ideas will actually amplify the company's ability. Actually, incredibly, so those are the ones which tend to get more supported when it's orthogonal or it's unrelated to the company's business. Once in a while, it will happen successfully because they'll have some mentor in the company who really pushes it through. But it's a much harder journey when that's the case.
It's also, and the last thing, thanks, John. The one last point I would make in this is that the investor community is also starting to change. And do you know who Larry Fink, is that a name that people know? Larry Fink is the chief executive of BlackRock, I think a $6 trillion hedge fund. And in his January message that he writes every year to shareholders, the one in January, it caused an earthquake in the financial community, because this guy who was the top of the most greedy Wall Street, bad banker type people, he said, look, we really want to shift our investments to organizations that are serving society, and that's what we're going to be focused on. And everybody went, oh, hang on a minute, if he can say that, then my God, things are shifting. So I think we are seeing a shift in terms of attitudes of investors. We're seeing, and it comes down to all of us as well as individuals. We might say, oh, I'm an individual, it doesn't really matter. But what we do as individuals can impact. Where's your pension sitting? Is it sitting in a impact investing fund, or is it just sitting in any old thing? You can ask your bank and push your bank or wherever your pension's sitting to do that. And if we all start doing that, then it gradually will start to change. Any other last quick questions? We've got probably five minutes left. Any that hasn't asked the question? That yes, please. Two. Well, one, two. What happened next? What happened after? I sometimes talk about. Have you seen the film Eat, Pray, Love? Julia Roberts. She's in Italy somewhere, I think. Rome was it, and then goes to Bali. So I had a little bit of I took time out, as you do when something like that happens. You don't just jump back into, you say, what the hell was that? So I took time out and eventually in 2016 left Accenture. And then I had the luxury, partly because I don't have kids in private school and things, I had the luxury just to Airbnb my place in Geneva and go doing my Eat, Pray, Love, Bali, around the world, Brazil, Mexico, while I was writing the book. So that's what do write a book. Don't write a book to make money, But if you want to go around the world and, you know, have a glass of wine or a beer on a beach and just, it's great fun. So this was written in many different countries around the world. And then I was working a lot on also the inner kind of self. So thinking a lot about not just what I was doing career-wise and resisted the temptation to go back into business, but yeah, who am I as a person? What do I want? What's my purpose in life? And just having come back from Bali again last weekend, I'll give you the kind of scoop that I reckon I need to write a second book, which is on the journey since then. So I'll keep you on but it's a journey that's kind of, it's been really quite crazy and interesting. The people I've met, the places I've been. I ended up in Burning Man last year, so I mean, yeah, all sorts of crazy kind of stuff. No ayahuasca. I don't need ayahuasca. I can go. I can get there without that stuff. So I think it's actually quite a kind of spiritual journey. And the trouble is, it's difficult to have these kind of conversations in business about, if you say the word, you can say burnout, and business is like, yeah, we understand burnout just about. That's okay. That doesn't scare us. You say spiritual awakening, they go, oh my God, he's lost the plot, right? So I don't know what it was exactly, but I think there is a big opportunity. The back of the book, what did I say? The first line, it says, business clearly has the power to change the world, but what if we as individuals had the power to change the world of business? That was my position. But if we want to change the world of business to change the world, we have to start with ourselves and change ourselves, and then we can do it. So that's what I've been working on, and that's book number 2 at some point, and it's kind of started as of last weekend. So yeah, but anyway, there you go. Now I'm committed to it. Now I can't get out. I've told you publicly, it's on video. Now I have to do a book number 2.
So my question is, I think that there are many people that actually start when they're young with an objective. Dream, a career dream, and so on.
Yeah.
Then during the path, you actually ask yourself, what are you really chasing? And I think there comes the moment of truth, because a lot of people, because they are chasing something different than the promotion of the money, change path.
Yeah.
And they go out of the business to open these good companies because they think they can change the world.
Yeah. Yeah.
In my opinion, that's not the way to change the world, and that basically leads to my question. For me, when it comes to that question should bring you to be even more ambitious and reach the top of the company, because it's really the captain of the ship, the one that decides where the ship is going. So if you want to change, I don't necessarily agree that you change the bottom. And for me, a lot of the good people tend to get out of the business because they find the negative place and they want to, on the contrary, work with people that have the same purpose. But you're not changing nothing if you live your dream. You need to get up there to make the change. So my question is, do you think for a person that today, after your experience, has this moment of truth, in which he thinks, I am actually working in this company, I don't like the way it's run, should that person leave and go open something different with people that share the same opinion, or should she try to change the company which is by trying to reach the top and change it from the top?
So I guess it's a good question, probably deserves a chocolate, yes, exactly.
I did it for the chocolate.
Didn't really want to know the answer, but he's got the chocolate now. And I mean, I'd be interested in other people's views on this question. I mean, I'm not saying there is only one way to do it, and we know that there's a lot of problems, a lot of failures all along. I would just challenge this notion that, you have to have a C in your title or get to the very top before you can affect change, because unfortunately that means that the 999 out of 1,000 of us that don't make it to the very top don't get there. Great if you can, and I've got a colleague in Accenture that's gone down that route, and he's had to work hard to, and if he gets to the top, I know that he will be doing good things. But too many of us don't do it. So I'm trying to make the point that intrapreneurship is not dependent on what job title you are. It doesn't mean you have to be in the CSR department. I'm saying, I'm trying to make the point, don't leave to change, stay in the company, and you can have a change. And I'll come to my my final sort of quiz question for the bottle of whiskey in a second, but I'll leave you with a question, and then we can come to the answer. But the question is, who's having more impact on poverty in Kenya, or who has had more impact on poverty in Kenya in the last 10 years? Is it Save the Children? Is it the United Nations? Or is it Vodafone? So there's three things there. Well, I won't come to the answers at the moment, but I do think, you know, I do think it's possible. What do other people think? I mean, it's you know, it's difficult to get to the top. That's the problem, and it makes it a bit exclusive. And also, the other challenge I would have is that I think nowadays the old notion that once you're at the top of a business and you can, you know, pull a lever and everyone goes this way, or pull a lever. I really think that organizations like the one I worked in, huge organizations, you know, they're so dispersed and so, you know, it's very difficult. You can set a strategy.
Good question, good point. What is the role for governments?
Through the people, I mean, through their direct, and I mean, push to enforce such a view.
Just the governments, the challenge I have with governments at the moment, I just wrote a op-ed that I've tried to get published on the whole Brexit thing at the moment. It's maybe quite upset over that many people. There's such a debate and I know in Italy there's and elsewhere, you're not going to tell you, but government has become so polarised in different ways. There's a picture in the back of the book here. You've probably seen this picture. Have you seen this picture? Have you seen the picture?
Yes.
Have you not seen this picture? Who's not seen it? Everybody's seen the picture. You've not seen it. What did you see in the picture? My dad showed me that. My dad was an art teacher. He showed me this when I was 8 years old. He said, "What do you see in the picture?" A lady with a hat. Is it an old lady or a young lady? It's a young lady. What does everybody else see? Does everybody see the young lady?
And the old lady.
Oh, an old lady. Do you see the old lady?
I don't see it now.
No? It's a witch. Like nose, chin. Have a look for a little while. This, for me, is the problem with today's democracy, right? And the Brexit vote, right? There was a referendum in the UK in June, and we were asking people, do you see the old lady or do you see the young lady? And 52% said, let's say, the old lady, and 48% the young lady. And of course, you know, sometimes there is not a binary decision. Sometimes it's both at the same time. You can be right and you can be wrong at the same time. And there's a compromise going on at the UK. You maybe aren't too involved at the moment. You're from Edinburgh, yeah, exactly. Well, Scotland voted very differently. But you're getting this kind of, choose one or the other. And the compromises say it's not an old lady or a young lady. It's a man, an old man. And no one sees the old man in the picture. So I think democracy, fake news, all these things, democracy in its traditional forms needs reinvented in some way for the digital age where we've got fake news and cyber espionage and all these things. But I also think we need to start to take into account, beyond the role of government as it was, the role of large corporations, because we now have the biggest states in the world, the biggest super states are multinational corporations. And they go across geographical boundaries. They don't have these kind of trade war issues. I know in Accenture, the Chinese Accenture, the Russian Accenture, the American Accenture, the European Accenture are all working really, really well together. The problem is, who are they serving, who decides, and the strategy. Another little anecdote, and then I'll leave this. This is the hobby horse about democracy. How do we bring democracy to these large organizations that have so much socioeconomic power? I had tonight in New York, I had a former colleague of mine, he's one of the heads of HR at Accenture. He sent out an appeal for some money. He said 60 of the partners from Accenture are sleeping rough in New York tonight to raise money for homeless people. So we're going to sleep out in the street in the snow and it's very cold. Can you give some money to this cause? So So I wrote back to him, and he sent this video. I said, sure, I'll give you $100. That's great. That's fantastic. I wish you the best of luck. Don't get pneumonia. But what about when you're out there? What about you also reverse it? What about you bring 60 homeless people into the boardrooms of Accenture around, and get them to give their inputs on the strategy of the firm and who it's serving, what it's doing. And he wrote back and said, that's an interesting challenge, I'll discuss it with my colleagues, and so maybe for each person that's sleeping out, bring in one homeless person, because I think they might have great sources of innovation, ideas. So I'm basically saying, the public, whether you're a shareholder or not a shareholder, I just think we get a vote in our own country, in the current democratic system. But you used to work in Amazon, I care about what Amazon does, because it impacts my mother in an island in Scotland. Should she not have a voice on this? So, anyway, got me on a thing, and the guy who asked the question is gone anyway, so it doesn't really matter. Any do you want to react to any of that before I get the answers to the quiz question? Any other last questions that we can just take, and then, time for drinks.
I think for me it's a matter of integrating values in the company.
Yeah.
So I don't think it has to be one purpose or the other, right? The purpose of selling to the end consumer or just working for social aspects. It's integrating
the
values,
two.
the two. And then seeing more and more companies doing this in different industries.
Yes.
So do you agree with this?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, what examples?
Probably is the way.
Yeah, there is a problem that traditionally there's still a mindset in too many companies that, and this hand is where we do business, and this is our business activity, and here's where we do good. So, do good, do business. And as you say, they have to come together, we have to combine the values. Because this is like 1% of the profits, and this is 99%. I want to get into the 99% of the business, and that's where entrepreneurship sits, is in there. Thank you for that. You get the last. Yay. But there is the whiskey prize. So the final question, as it was, impact in Kenya over the last 10 years. Save the Children, A. B, United Nations, C, Vodafone. Hands up for A. Hands up for B. Hands up for C. All right, we can all share the whiskey, but are you right? That's the question. Why do you say C? By the way, just before you answer that, I asked that question to the top 100 of a large NGO. It wasn't Save the Children, but it was another big brand name. And I asked their top 100 managers the same question. And there was 2 hands went up when I said their organisation, and everyone else guessed Vodafone. I said, well, that's interesting, Am I in the right room? Is this not what you're meant to be doing? And you think it's something else? Why don't you join Vodafone if that's the, I should be giving my charity money to Vodafone. Why do you think it's Vodafone?
That is my personal example. I lived in India.
Yes.
And the one company just bring information, interactivity.
Yes.
So you can access products that you did not have before in India.
Yeah.
Education.
Yeah.
So finally the impact is much more big than to do the things for people.
Yeah.
So they learn to do things.
Yeah.
And they just take some shortcuts on the
For me, it's because Vodafone is the one who put in the money. You can give it to Save the Children, you can give it to the United Nations, you can give it directly, but you're still the one putting the money.
Putting in the money. But what's the
It's the M-Pesa.
M-Pesa. Has anybody heard of M-Pesa?
Which is the banking.
The banking, mobile banking. Allow payments. And that was an intrapreneur. So it wasn't this M-Pesa thing, it wasn't the R&D department or anything. It was a middle manager in Vodafone who saw that people were using airtime minutes as an alternative currency and buying things in the market. They didn't have bank accounts, but rather than sort of using cash, I'll give you 60 minutes, you give me that chicken or something like that. I don't know what it was working. And then the mobile money revolution, and now most of the economy of Kenya is through M-Pesa. So I reckon, I don't know what, there was, who came up with Vodafone first of all. I'll give it to the bottle of whiskey. Look at that. Generosity of the Scotsman. Congratulations, sir. It's a fine bottle of whiskey. Which nationality are you? Italian. Italian is the sort of. Okay, so listen, I think we will draw this to a close. I really do appreciate you coming out tonight and asking the questions. If any of you do want to know a bit more of the background story and some of the bits and pieces, you're welcome to book them. I'm discounting them down 15 francs just to cover the cost of the shipping from the UK. 25 for 2 books if you want to give it. I mean, Christmas presents in your stockings, your kids are going to go, thank you dad, thank you mum, or thank you brother, or thank you sister. What I always wanted. You can wrap it up. But anyway, thank you very much for listening. I appreciate it. Thank you.
I would like to thank Gib Bulloch for his presentation today and for playing a key role in developing a more mindful approach to work. I would also like to thank all of you for your participation and UniMile, the University of Geneva, for hosting the event. I remind you that in January, yex is organizing a networking event and in February a seminar on the virtual reality, so please check your newsletter. We will be very happy to see you again. And to conclude our evening, we are going to have an aperitivo, so please stay with us and join. And thanks again and enjoy your evening.